Why must a woman never marry? This is not a rebellion against the institution of marriage itself, but an exploration into the forbidden psychological truth that Carl Jung uncovered. Marriage, for a woman who has not first found herself, is not a union. It is a symbolic prison. The greatest danger she faces is not the fear of loneliness, but the slow, silent tragedy of self-abandonment. No external union, no matter how passionate, can ever replace the sacred inner marriage with the self. This is the path we walk today, into the depths of the feminine soul. From the moment she is born, society begins to build a myth inside her. It is the myth of the bride. Through fairy tales, cultural rituals, and unspoken expectations, she learns that her ultimate fulfillment lies in being chosen. Marriage is framed not as a beginning, but as the grand finale, the happily ever after that validates her entire existence. This myth doesn't need proof. It thrives in the air she breathes. She is meticulously trained to be desirable, to be nurturing, to be accommodating, but she is rarely, if ever, taught how to belong to herself. And so, marriage becomes a dangerous psychological trap. It offers itself as a convenient substitute for the arduous journey of self-knowledge. Love is idealized into a magical elixir that will fill the inner void. Many women enter marriage unconsciously seeking an identity, a purpose, a sense of wholeness they feel they lack. But instead of finding themselves, they lose contact with their own center. The prison is not made of iron bars. It is woven from praise, approval, and the comforting illusion of security. Society applauds this loss of self as a sign of maturity, of success. This is where the treacherous dance of projection begins. A woman who has not integrated her own inner masculine energy, her animus, will inevitably project it onto a man. She doesn't fall in love with him, but with the parts of herself he awakens. He becomes a mirror for her own unlived potential, a savior for her fears, an altar for her devotion. When he inevitably fails to carry this impossible weight, or when he simply withdraws, her world collapses. The agony she feels is not the loss of love, but the shattering of the projection. This dynamic creates a state of profound dependency, a life built on illusion and emotional servitude. This wounded feminine dynamic warps the very nature of love. Loving, which should be an act of expansion, becomes a process of self-erasure. Devotion spirals into exhaustion. Care for another becomes neglect of oneself. The initial idealization curdles into bitter disappointment and unspoken resentment. The woman becomes depleted, tired, emotionally numb. This profound exhaustion is often misdiagnosed as depression or a midlife crisis. But in reality, it is something far deeper. It is the soul, starved and silenced, crying out to come home. We often choose roles over freedom because roles offer safety. They come with a script, a defined purpose, and the promise of social approval. Freedom, on the other hand, demands solitude and terrifying responsibility. Many women mistake solitude for abandonment, fearing it as a void. But true solitude is not emptiness. It is a deep, intimate contact with the self. Without this chosen solitude, the sacred process of individuation, of becoming who you truly are, cannot even begin. Then comes the breaking point, a quiet, terrifying moment of clarity. She begins to feel invisible, even to herself. Her identity is buried under layers of expectations, duties, and masks. The praise she once craved now feels like a cage. And one day, the question surfaces from the depths. Whose life am I actually living? This realization is an existential rupture. It is a crossroads where she must choose, either to awaken, no matter the cost, or to retreat back into the comfortable sleep of conformity. To awaken, she must face the death of the good wife. The good wife is a socially rewarded archetype, but she is spiritually dead. She performs devotion, but her vitality has vanished. Her eyes have lost their shine. Society calls this maturity, but Jung would call it a petrified anima. Internally, she has become a cemetery of her own unlived dreams and desires. This awakening is often heralded by a dark night of the soul. A strange dream, a sudden silence, a profound exhaustion, or a complete breakdown can act as the trigger. The forgotten inner girl, the wild and authentic self, begins to resurface. The pain intensifies. Not because things are getting worse, but because the truth is finally emerging. The persona, the carefully constructed mask she wears for the world, begins to dissolve. She must now confront the inner patriarch. That relentless voice of conditioning that whispers, "Be good, be useful, don't complain." She must see this voice for what it is, not her own, but a ghost from the collective unconscious. True power is found not in a relationship, but in chosen solitude. This solitude is not a void, but an altar, a sacred space where she can finally meet herself. Here, she sacrifices her masks, not her essence. Taking them off hurts. It is more painful than staying in the familiar roles. The naked soul is often misunderstood by a world that prefers polite performances. But in this solitude, she stops begging for validation. She stops adapting to fit smaller spaces. She stops shrinking. A woman who belongs to herself is a threat to the established order. She cannot be controlled, manipulated, or owned. And so, she is often labeled cold, selfish, difficult. But the truth is, she has simply stopped betraying herself. Her very presence, her quiet authenticity, provokes discomfort in those who are still asleep. She may speak less, but her words carry the weight of her entire being. Her existence becomes a living challenge to the unconscious patterns that govern the collective. This is the journey toward what Jung called individuation, the inner marriage. Before a woman can truly unite with another, she must first marry her own soul. This is not a metaphor. It is a psychological, spiritual, and visceral reality. It is the union of the opposites within her feeling and her thinking, her anima and her animus. When this happens, projection is withdrawn. Hunger is replaced by discernment. Love ceases to be a desperate necessity and becomes a conscious choice. This is the great alchemical work. It begins with the negredo, the blackening, the symbolic death of all her illusions about love and life. Then comes the albedo, the whitening, the clearing of consciousness as she separates her true self from the projections and expectations of others. Finally, she arrives at the rubedo, the reddening, the embodiment of the integrated self. She becomes, as one might say, a serene fire. Waiting is replaced by presence. Lack is replaced by wholeness. From this place of wholeness, a new form of love becomes possible. It is a love that no longer seeks completion in another. It is a love between two sovereign beings, walking side by side, not merged into one. It is a love based on reverence, not fusion. The other person is no longer a mirror of what is missing, but a reflection of shared being. This love honors solitude, respects boundaries, and expands both individuals rather than consuming them. So, why should a woman never marry? She should never marry before she belongs completely to herself. No external ritual can replace this inner commitment. A marriage without individuation is a fragile mirror, destined to crack. The deepest vow a woman can ever make is to never, ever abandon herself again. Whole women love freely, consciously, and without fear. They cannot be tamed, they cannot be domesticated. And that, perhaps, is why the world has always feared them. Thank you for watching. If this exploration resonated with you, consider subscribing for more journeys into the soul.